Retro.
Are you an aspiring Jedi, or do you dabble with the dark side of the Force?
Regardless of whether you fancy yourself a defender of the light or an aspiring Sith Lord, you're going to need a lightsaber.
Podcast Stardust is pleased to partner with Saber Masters, the creators of high-quality, durable, and affordable lightsabers.
Saber Masters is preparing to launch the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, and right now you can get 2 for the price of 1.
So, check out the link in our show notes and go get your Ultimate Lightsabers from Saber Masters.
And don't forget to use our referral code STARDUST to save $10 at checkout.
And each purchase using our referral code helps support Podcast Stardust.
This is Heather Antost, Gonk enthusiast, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. If they talk about anything else than Dr. Aphra, they're doing it wrong.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we're going back to 2015 for a discussion of the first Marvel Star Wars miniseries of the current canon with a look at Princess Leia. But first, Jay, where can we be found around the internet?
Very easy to find us. We are on Twitter, which used to be Twitter, now X, Facebook, and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
It's always going to be Twitter. Always. All right. The dish is aligned. The signal is boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So, like I said, we are looking at the Princess Leia miniseries that Marvel put out back in 2015. So, a little background. When Marvel got back into the Star Wars comic business, they had taken it over for Dark Horse, who had been putting out a bunch of Star Wars comics. And this is, of course, the beginning of the new canon that we have. And they started off by doing an ongoing Star Wars comic and a Darth Vader comic, which synced up for the most part for a while. And then on the heels of that, they introduced this Princess Leia mini series as the first one that they've had out there. This was written by Mark Waid with pencils by Terry Dodson, inks by Rachel Dodson. I'm not sure if they're related or not. Colorist Jordi Belair, letterer is VC's Joe Caramagna. Cover art by Terry Dodson and Rachel Dodson. And then the editors were Heather Antos, who you've heard at the beginning of some of our episodes, Charles Beecham, and Jordan D. White. So just as a general summary of this comic series, it picks up right in the throne room medal ceremony at the beginning of A New Hope. And Leia's kind of being put on the shelves by General Jan Dodonna because she's got a $10 million or 10 million credit bounty on her head. But she's not satisfied with that. And she meets a rebel pilot named Yvonne, and those two set off to kind of round up surviving Alderaanians because the Emperor is trying to wipe them out, all memory of them. And yeah, so they go on a couple different missions. They survive an Imperial assault, and Leia kind of earns the respect of Yvonne along the way. So there you go. Brief synopsis of the series. Jay, I don't think you'd had the opportunity to read this before now. What did you think about it?
I hadn't. And I was, when you first suggested we were looking for some things to do, for a programming schedule. And of course, I always love Princess Leia, anything Princess Leia. And I didn't even know that this really existed. I mean, I knew of it, but not really anything about it. And wow, I was blown away. And I even texted you after I was done and I was like, this was fantastic. So for me, it was just something about the way that the storyline was presented that was just, it was so believable. And it was so, immersive in a way that it just felt like it was so well fit into the universe of Star Wars, which not to say that other comics aren't, but I don't know. I just felt like this one just really fit well in everything that we know about Star Wars. And it was just such a satisfying series. I loved it.
Yeah, I liked it quite a bit as well too. And I think I appreciated it more on this reading than I did on the initial reading. And I think one of the reasons why is that when I read this the first time, I read each one of the issues as they came out on a monthly basis. And so there was a few details in the earlier comics that I wasn't remembering when I got to the fourth and fifth issue of the series. But reading them all here in one fell swoop, I have the collected series, trade paperback that I used to read at this time. That way, I think is an even better story that way, as opposed to getting 20 pages a month for 5 months on that. So I really liked it. What did you think of the portrayal of Leia?
Oh, I thought it was perfect. And, there was a couple of things though. She did seem in some ways, I guess I shouldn't say perfect. I take that back. There was a couple of things that she felt a little bit less than confident in
Mhm.
terms of, how I felt Leia was truly portrayed especially in A New Hope. Because she was coming off of that, into the garbage chute flyboy and just really confident. And there were some moments in here that she really had some, you know, and I don't want to necessarily say self-doubt, but yet it was, especially in terms of the idea of hope.
Mhm.
So, there was a couple little things like that, I guess, that, you know, seemed like, is this really Leia? But given the circumstances of everything that she was going through at the time, it actually made it her more believable of, a character that she would be sort of going back and having a little bit of not necessarily doubt, but just some thoughts about where her current state of mind is.
Yeah, to your point, this is like the first opportunity and she doesn't really grieve and mourn, but she hasn't had an opportunity to mourn and grieve for Alderaan
Right.
and the loss of Bail and Brer Organa here. And that kind of gets brought up at the beginning of the first issue. They finish the middle presentation, and there's a little bit of added to it where she mentions to those assembled that we need to take a moment to remember Alderaan and the loss of the Organas, blah blah blah. And then you've got Yvonne and some other pilots there that are just like, that's it. That's all she's going to say. And they like
Mhm.
nickname her the Ice Queen. And so it wasn't like until later in the series where, she makes that mark that, hope is what brought me to the rebellion and Alderaan paid for it. And, and so, then she says, now my hope has led the Empire here. I don't think the galaxy can survive much more hope from me. And so
Mhm.
I don't know if this is necessarily one of the stages of grief, but it is, all this loss is impacting her. And Luke even brings this up at the beginning of the series. He makes mention, like, I just want to thank you. You were there for me when, all the things I've been going through when you lost Ben and his parents and stuff like that. And because she'd asked him, like, why are you looking at me that way? And then he says, well, I just wish there was someone that could be there for you, or you would let be there for you.
Mhm.
And that's just like, I don't know, you want to call it a character flaw or not, that Leia isn't as willing to rely on others for her own personal needs as she is willing to be there for everybody else's.
And I do think that that's kind of a standby of Leia's character,
Mhm.
even as we see her all the way through The Last Jedi, and just everything that she's always done for everyone else and that she's been for everyone else. I mean, think about even in A New Hope. I mean, she just lost her entire planet, and here's Luke lamenting over Obi-Wan, and what does she do? She comes over and she consoles him. So I do think that a lot of that is spot on. And, and just Luke reaching out to her in that way is, his ability to be empathetic to her on a different level, which I think is awesome. But I do think you're right to say about her kind of going through the stages of grief, and at first it's almost denial, and that's where
Mhm.
the Ice Queen thing I think comes from. And then eventually she does reconcile and she does kind of go through her own little form of grieving. But her way of getting through that is by saving the rest of the survivors that she can and rounding them all up from everywhere that she possibly can do that from.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and so she does that. She gets this cloistered, um, what were they? These singers that
Hmm.
were on Naboo, and they wouldn't do their performances live because they wouldn't invite any contact from the outside world, so that it wouldn't like pollute their message. They're just in tune with what they were doing. And it was to the point where they didn't even know that Alderaan had been destroyed.
Right.
So that was kind of fascinating. And then she goes and she finds this other Alderaanian surveillance group. And then there's an Alderaanian colony on the world of Asperian. So to your point, she goes around kind of like rounding up Alderaanians. And that's the whole mission, is to find the survivors, get them away from the path of the Empire, which is trying to wipe them out, and put them on towards their future, on a path to their future, where they could either settle on a new world or set up a permanent colony elsewhere.
Right.
To that end, she meets this rebel pilot named Yvonne. What do you think about her?
Well, at first, like you said, she was just really not warming up to Leia because of the way that Leia had portrayed herself, in at least in her eyes, that she was not being as you know, consoling, I guess you could say, as she needed to be as the royal. But I did think that it was really cool that Yvonne had this really deep sense of what it meant to understand what it meant to be an Alderaanian and
Mhm.
to really respect the royalty. And because at first she kept calling her ma'am, and really kind of having this deep level of, and I keep going back to the word respect, which is part of it, but she was deferring to that formality. And I think some of that was just because the fact that she didn't want to warm up to Leia, because she did have this feeling about Leia as being such a cold person. But then again, there's this part of her that wanted to preserve the Alderaanian heritage just as much as Leia did in her own way. And, the fact that she had trained under Brea, oh my gosh. I mean, that was just the coolest little thing too, that she learned a lot of these things directly from Leia's mom. And so I thought that was cool.
Yeah. To your point, she was annoyed with Leia for not being enough of a royal. She calls herself a royalist.
Hmm.
Yvonne does, and here Leia is a general in the Republic when it comes, or the Republic, a general in the rebellion when it comes down to it. And Leia wants to like round up the Alderaanians to protect them. Whereas to your point, Yvonne is like, but it's not enough. The people aren't enough. It's like the culture. For Leia, it's the people. For Yvonne, it's the culture there. And so Leia hasn't really embraced this role of being the heir to the throne of Alderaan. And that's really getting to Yvonne. But eventually, Leia earns her respect, and she comes around, which is pretty cool. I liked Yvonne quite a bit. She was
Hmm.
the standout character for me of this, obviously besides Leia, and I guess it's not that big a claim to make considering that she gets the second most amount of time in this entire 5-issue series there. But she shows up in a few other places after this, but this is Yvonne's like big moment, the most attention she gets in all of Star Wars canon.
Yeah, it really is. And, as far as Yvonne goes, I really did like her as a character as well. And I wish that we would have gotten to see more of her. Does she actually exist anywhere else? Like in
Yeah,
canon?
I can't remember which books are out there, but she does make a few appearances, and I don't think she has any other major appearances in Star Wars, but I know, at the end of this series, Leia tells Yvonne that she's going back to the rebellion now that they rounded up all these Alderaanians, and Yvonne's like, well, but we need a princess. And then Leia says, well, then elect one. I nominate you. Just make sure the process is fair and don't let Jorah get it. And we get that panel at the end where you kind of see Yvonne dressed in the white gown, and it doesn't say that she's a leader, but that's the insinuation that she's in that role. And so later there's another book where she's working with the Alderaanians to, I think, set up a space station or something, maybe where Alderaan used to be. I can't remember exactly, and I'm gonna have to research that. Probably should have just gone to Wikipedia, but regardless, yeah. But she does show up from time to time.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool to know.
Hmm. Okay, so one of the things that's going on is after they rescue this cloister from Naboo, and there's some backstabbing and things that goes on there before Leia's able to get to them and get them off the planet, including I couldn't tell was Lord Jund an Alderaanian or was he one of the Naboo, or did you catch that?
Well, I think that he was part of the Alderaanians, but he was on Naboo, and
Hmm.
he was kind of fronting for this other, cloister, if you will, of Alderaanians, is what I understood.
Yeah, but he ends up betraying Leia
Right.
was the thing because she goes there and Lord Jun does not know where the cloister is. Only this other assistant that is there, and her name is there's a lot of these names that you have to learn. But anyways, she's got this other assistant that knows where they are and kind of is their go between the cloister and the real world. But Lord Jund is basically trying to like cut off the head of the golden goose and get rid of all of them. And so he kind of sets Leia up. But once, so anyways, moving past that, they get his ship, which is also called the Lord Jund, which
Yeah.
kind of reminded me of Lorna D in the High Republic.
Yes. Yes. I love that.
But one of the members of the cloister is this woman named Tace, and she has a sister named Tula that she doesn't realize has been captured by the Empire, and the Empire is using Tula to get to Tace to find out more about where the Alderaanians are and what Leia is up to. And Leia puts everything on the line to rescue Tula here. What do you think about that mission?
Well, for Leia, it does kind of ring true to her character in that she's willing to put herself in harm's way if she believes that there's a larger reason for having to do that. And I think for Leia, some of that was she saw a bigger picture here, as far as that there could be a chance that her sister could come back from the throes of the Empire and could, potentially be reunited or whatever. But it is kind of a big risk. I mean, and even Yvonne calls her out on that. You're really putting a lot out there just to do this one thing, and there's a whole other, larger picture to see over here. But Leia sees things a little bit differently, so it's like I said, it is true to character, I think, for Leia to be able to do something like that. But what did you think?
Yeah, basically what you said, but then also there's this notion that, she and Yvonne set up the rescue, like right on top of it, which is
Hmm.
also perfectly within Leia's character. As soon as you know, Tula was released by the Empire and Leia's walking over in that direction, Nine Numb in his little Celestian ship, and Evan comes swooping in, and she pops out, or Evan, that is, the side hatch, and starts blasting away at the Imperials, and they get away. So, just kind of like a Rambo moment for Yvonne there
Yeah. It is.
in that part of that rescue. And but no, I like that. It was it was a neat little subplot that played right into the conclusion of the overall story because you had all of these Alderaanian ships. They built up this fleet over at Aspiron, and then the Empire's like, oh well, they thought they destroyed Leia because they blew up a decoy that Nyan Lum launched. Is like, now we're going to go wipe them all out. They're all in the same place. So that was a cool little way of getting them all together like that.
It was.
Yeah. And then there's this entire notion of this world of Asperion. And it's kind of funny. They almost look like a species of Darth Mauls without horns.
Yeah.
They have all red faces with like black marks on them, but they're not that. They're not Zabrak. And they weren't from Dathomir, but they have this world, Asperion, and the Sperians will like grant sanctuary to people from all kinds of places, refugees, and then will create environments that suit them. And they're known for this all over the galaxy. And Leia sends Jorah, who's ahead of the surveillance, and then Parse, I can't want to say her name is the Alderaanian that was in charge of the cloister, to go negotiate with the Asperions and try and get some of the Alderaanians there to join them.
Hmm.
But when they get there, Jorah meets an Alder Asperion, so someone who's half Alderaanian, Alder Asperion, and just this look of disgust comes right over her face and completely doomed that mission like within seconds.
Hmm. Yes.
Only for Leia to make this great speech about what it is to being an Alderaanian and what it means for Alderaanian survival. And the one line is like, as long as one drop of Alderaanian survives, then Alderaan survives, which what gets them drawn back into it. But what did you think about that portion of the plot?
Well, Jorah, she was too much of a purist, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? In the fact that yes, she wanted to preserve the culture of Alderaan, but at the expense of those who, eventually became Alderaanians. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter who was born there, that as you mentioned, that these are these Alder Asperions, but yet they are considered, citizens of Alderaan. And I think that some of that probably comes from the fact that Leia knew that she was adopted. She always knew that she was. And so she became an Alderaanian through her identity as, this person that had been brought into the culture. So even though she didn't have the blood, quote unquote, that she could appreciate the fact that it's not, in the old saying, I guess you could say, family isn't always blood. And so Jorah definitely almost completely sabotages this and, brings this whole mission, as you said, down to its knees. And then Leia, as you said, just brought it right back. And that was such a great speech too.
Mm-hmm.
If one piece of our music remains, Alderaan remains. If one piece of our creativity remains. And I did like that as far as the portrayal of Alderaan's culture, is that it was all about thinking and problem solving and philosophy and art and beauty and that type of thing. And I just thought that was a really cool portrayal of Alderaan. And I think that's one of the reasons overall that I really, really appreciated this comic series, is because it did go into the history and culture of Alderaan in a way that we, up until this point, I had never really seen before.
Yeah. Yeah. And then to that point, Leia ends this whole series as she's going back to their rebellion. She leaves them with this message. She says, "We are all around. We answer rage with wisdom. We answer fear with imagination. We answer war with hope. We are each of us important. Alderaan survives." So yeah, they lost their home world. They lost most of their citizens, but as long as there's some of them left to express these values, then Alderaan survives, even though there's no more world for it there. So that was really cool. Yeah.
Indeed.
And I also love that that half Alderaanian Asperian beyond Bionel. You could it was such a well drawn panel. Like he hears that part of the message. As long as one drop of Alderaanian blood, remains, then Alderaan survives. It just the how they illustrated like that catching his attention, and then he brings his warship into battle to destroy that Imperial Star Destroyer.
Hmm.
Was just a really fitting moment.
Yeah, it really was.
Hmm. What other moments from the series stood out to you?
Well, just the fact that they go to Naboo, just in general, and that just
Mhm.
happens to be one of the big hubs of places where they need to go in order to make this mission possible. And then there's that one point where Leia stops and she sees that stained glass mural type thing of Padme in
Mhm.
her red invasion gown, and she's just completely mesmerized by it. She's just, so taken aback by it. And even Yvonne says something to her and she's like, "Hey, there's just something about that," and it just completely, takes her in. And just knowing that she's here, she is on the home world of her actual mother,
Mhm.
doing these things. And so I just thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and the other thing about that is like, I don't know if it was Leia's imagination or she had a vision, but that portrait of Padme turned and looked at her. The head turned and looked at her.
Oh,
And and
I didn't notice that.
yeah, because it starts off looking from right to left, and then it's almost like Padme looks over her shoulder at Leia, and that's what Leia's reacting to. And then when you cut back to it, it's her looking off to the side again, and she can't explain that to Yvonne.
How did I not catch that? Wow. Okay, that just gave me the chills.
You know,
That's really cool.
one of the other scenes that I really liked, I think, came in the second issue, and it's Leia reflecting on her time as a little girl. And at one point, there's this dish, this plant called Rika. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but she
Mhm.
doesn't like it. And Bale is telling her that you need to eat it because if you don't, then how you'll be able to look in the eyes of the farmers that grow it off worlds, and then the people who bring it here so that we can eat it and we can grow up and be strong, which is a neat little diplomacy thing that Bale is teaching her. But then there's a follow-up scene where she's engaged in some sparring and she knocks her mentor over, and the mentor says like, well, how did you get so strong, little one? She's like, I ate my Ruka. And then she's not supposed to be there training. She's supposed to be off doing some diplomatic work. Oh, language studies is what it was. And she doesn't want to do that. She wants to get in on the action. And and then Bale is explaining, the importance of being there and being able to learn languages and talk to people and kind of be a diplomat. And then Leia's response to that is just like, well, doesn't a princess ever get to think of herself ever? And Bale's response is sometimes, but of others, always. And so it was a cool Bail Organa moment. But this so reminded me of the portrayal of Leia and little Leia and Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yes, it does.
And I thought it was just simply fantastic.
Yep, you took the words right out of my mouth, because I actually had all of that written down too. And just the fact that this is, as you said, with Bale teaching this to Leia, and it made me think of the Kenobi series for sure. And it was also, the lesson in the fact that we do this because it also forms these allegiances and alliances and getting along with other cultures and planets. And if we help them, then they help us, and together we are stronger, and I just thought that was such a cool message, and something that, obviously Leia has brought with her entire life as a diplomat, and, being able to carry forward in her work that she does on other planets, and in her, engagement with other people.
Yeah. I'm also thinking about the comment you made about Leia being on Naboo here. Didn't she and a friend go to Naboo in the Leia, Princess of Alderaan book that Claudia Gray wrote?
I'm
When she
sure
was
she
young?
probably did.
I know
Yeah.
she did. And this
Yeah.
is a spoiler for that book, because Panaka was the governor of that world and he gets blown up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, she's there on Naboo.
Mm-hmm.
And then she returns to Moon. Now, this would be after this comic, but in the Shattered Empire comic series,
Okay.
when Project Cinder has been enacted, and then she goes there with Poe Dameron's mother and Shara Bay, and they and the Queen defeat the satellites that are causing the weather on Naboo to go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So she gets a lot of opportunities to go to Naboo, which is pretty cool. And she has no idea at the time that Padme
Right.
is her mother.
Right. Which is just so ironic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But another one that really stands out to me is Yvonne's relationship with Nine Numb.
Oh yeah.
And, of course, as we know, Nine Numb goes on to be a very huge player in Return of the Jedi. And, with the blowing up the second Death Star with Lando and the Millennium Falcon. But, one of the things that really surprised me as well about Nine Numb's appearance in this is with Leia, is that, eventually as Nine Numb gets these Alderaanians off of Sullust, Leia gives him that necklace that it's like the Chaldani Waves
Mhm.
necklace that she wears in the medal ceremony at the end of A New Hope. And I was like, wow, that to me, that's huge.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about that too. And it's kind of funny because like Yvonne is just like gushing over this big friendship she has with Nine Numb,
Right.
and then she's very cold and icy with Leia up,
Hmm.
at that point still. So,
Right. And
uh,
she can speak Sullustan too, which is cool. Yvonne can.
mhm. Yeah, not just understand it, she speaks it because they do that little
Mhm.
weird script thing in the comic to indicate that you blah 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 blah, that she's doing that.
Exactly.
Um, One of my other favorite Yvonne moments is, and talking about expressions, and I talked about Bayon there when he heard Leia talk about one drop of Alderaanian blood earlier. But I think it's in the second issue. They get to know Naboo and they meet Lord Jund, and he's fawning over Leia, and then he like fawns over Yvonne, but like he bends over to kiss her hand, and the you can just see Yvonne like rolling her eyes, like I don't have time for this, but I remember when I read this back in 2015, I was doing reviews for each one of these issues and all of the Marvel Star Wars comics at the time, and I picked that out as my favorite panel for that particular comic, just because, again, it wasn't a big action scene or anything, but it just conveyed so much without having to use any words in that one panel.
Yeah, I mean, this entire comic just does such a fantastic job of telling the story through visuals and through, the script itself. And it is kind of reading dense. It's a little bit more reading than I guess maybe some of your other quote unquote typical comics are. But I think that's another thing I really appreciated about this is that it really did have a lot of exposition into the story itself, and it was a good balance between the art and the verbiage, the words, and that type of thing. So yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
I really did appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, like I said, I liked it the first time, but I really, really appreciated it as a collected volume the second time around. Be able to reach through them all at once. It's much more of a cohesive experience and a great way to take it all in.
Yeah.
Any last points before we wrap it up?
Just a couple. Did you think that Akbar was very brash, more so than we've seen him previously, or that I guess for me, I just thought, oh my gosh, like he's calling these people these children. I
Yeah,
could just hear his voice in my head as I was reading through that, and he was just bashing the people that were on the bridge and was not happy with their performance whatsoever. And I was like, Akbar, you're being pretty mean there, dude.
yeah, that's a good point. Good catch.
And then I also appreciated Dodonna as he was looking through all the possible planets for a new base.
Hmm.
And you have the little outward thoughts that he's expressing about each planet, like something's wrong with this one, and I can't remember the exact words, but nope, this one's off the list, or not breathable oxygen, nope, no possible planets. And he's
Yeah,
doing that as he's talking to Leia, but then he's also telling her, that he was close to Leia's parents. And so there's that other little relationship connection too between Leia and Rey and Bale, and then Dodonna, which I didn't realize.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I know another moment that I absolutely loved when they got to Naboo. Leia is posing as an Imperial officer,
Oh
and she
yeah.
daps the name Minister Solo.
Yes.
I got a good chuckle out of that.
Yeah, it's like, could you be any more like obvious about who's on your mind?
Yeah, yeah. So that was a good one. All right. Any others?
I think that's it. Yeah, that's what all I have in my notes, but great comic, and I'm so
Mhm.
glad that we did it. And this is one of those kind of things that I would love to see even as like a short little presentation, somehow live action, which I know is not possible, but I just think that this would be so cool to see in action.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see at least some of the elements of the story. Bring Yvonne back in live action.
Oh, for sure.
She'd be a character to have around and doing stuff. So,
Mhm.
okay. Well, then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. But thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of the Princess Leia miniseries. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, we do all kinds of comic discussions from time to time. And you can get all those downloaded automatically if you hit that subscribe button on your podcatcher of choice. I also like to remind you can find our entire catalog of shows over on retrozap.com, which is also home to the RetroZap Podcast Network and features other great podcasts such as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Case Files, The Animaniacast, Brews and Blasters, Dorklair, Dooncast, Enjoy Stuff, Love, Death, and Robots, plus Superhero Suite and Warp Trails. If we could be so bold, we'd like to ask you for a couple favors. One, ratings and reviews. Whatever podcatcher you use, that's a great way of helping the show get noticed. If you're listening on YouTube, hit that like button and subscribe. That'd be fantastic. Reviews on Apple Podcasts, again, that drives the algorithm. I know every podcast you listen to probably tells you that. And then again, just the word of mouth, whether you share the show on social media or tell your friends about the show, that, if they like Star Wars, especially if they like Star Wars, that just helps others find it and helps us out with getting our numbers up and getting, making, again, more available to other people. So with those things in mind, Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody of our social contacts and where else we can be found around the internet?
Absolutely. So we are very conveniently and easily found on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Podcast Stardust. And you can also check out our many Pinterest boards as well as some other outlets where you can listen to us and find all of the Podcast Stardust goodness you can handle. And that is on YouTube and our YouTube music channel. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out. And then we also have a room on the Wretches App Discord server. So Dennis was just running down all the different shows that are part of the Wretches App Podcast Network, and all of those shows have their own Discord rooms as well as our own as well. So you can check that out in the link in our show notes. And another link you can check out is to our TeePublic store. So if you are in need of a t-shirt or a sweatshirt, coffee mug, all kinds of things, we have 7 different show logo designs available on all that and more. And once again, you can go to teepublic.com or hit up that link in our show notes. And one last link for you is to our Saber Masters referral. And you can go to either sabermasters.com or you can hit up that link in our show notes and you can check out all of the different battle ready sabers that Saber Masters has. And if you do happen to get something, make sure that you put in the code Stardust at checkout, and that will earn you an extra $10 off. And it also does help to support Podcast Stardust.
Okay, before we say goodbye to everybody, you want to remind everyone what you got going on with cosplay?
Sure. So on my Instagram, which is j.snipscosplay, you can catch all the fun that is all of my cosplay adventures. And I am Ahsoka, 2 different versions of Hera, as well as the 4th Sister Inquisitor, and some Leia here and there as well. So you can check that out, and my original concept Mandalorian. And I do have a couple of events coming up. One right around the corner is the Cleveland Gaming Classic. So I'll be at the IX Center from September 20th through the 22nd. So you'll have to check out my stories and my Instagram page for all the recaps there. And then I also have a couple other things in the works for October as well. So once again, check all that out on j.snipscosplay.
All right, coming on the show this Friday, we'll be getting back into some Star Wars news to wrap up the week. And then on Monday, we'll start the week with another episode of the Clone Wars, which will be episode 6 of the season 1. So until then, thanks for listening to episode 780 of Podcast Stardust. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, may the Force be